It's January 1965. Inside a locked room in Dearborn, Michigan, a group of Ford engineers stand around an engine that NASCAR was never supposed to see. No badges, no press photos, no corporate executives hovering over shoulders. Just raw aluminum, steel, and intent. The room smells like machine oil and cigarette smoke. Someone has coffee going cold on a workbench. Nobody's drinking it. They're all staring at the same thing, a V8 engine sitting on a stand. But not like any V8 they've ever built before. Someone breaks the silence and says it out loud. If they let this thing race, it's over. Nobody argues, nobody laughs, because everyone in that room knows he's right. This wasn't just another V8. This was a weapon, and after just one season of existence, it was banned from top-level racing forever. Most people have heard the nickname, the legend, the myth, but almost nobody knows the real reason this engine scared racing officials so badly that they killed it before it ever turned a lap. You think you know this story? Not like this. In the early 1960s, American racing was a war fought in cast iron. NASCAR was booming. Grandstands were packed every Sunday. Families drove hours to watch their favorite brands battle on superspeedways, and Sunday wins were translating directly into Monday sales. The saying was simple: win on Sunday, sell on Monday. And it was true. Dealerships tracked race results like stock prices. A Daytona win could move inventory for months. A championship season could define a brand for a generation. The stakes were enormous, the pressure was crushing, and the competition was brutal. Chevrolet was on top. Their 409 V8 had become a legend. The Beach Boys wrote songs about it. Kids who couldn't drive yet knew its name. By 1964, Chevrolet was quietly developing something even more dangerous: the 427 Mystery Motor, a big block designed specifically to dominate NASCAR. Word leaked out of Detroit. Ford engineers heard the rumors. They saw the dyno numbers being whispered about, and they knew they were getting embarrassed in public. Race after race, headline after headline, Chevrolet winning, Ford losing. Henry Ford II hated losing. He hated it more than almost anything. This was personal for him. His name was on those cars. His grandfather's legacy was on those cars. Every time a Ford got passed by a Chevrolet, it felt like a personal insult. So he gave his engineers a simple order: no compromises, no rules lawyering, no half measures. Build the most powerful stock car engine NASCAR has ever seen, and then beat everyone with it. What they came up with would become known as the Ford 427 SOHC single overhead cam, the Cammer. The project started in secrecy. Only a handful of engineers knew the full scope. Parts were ordered under fake project codes. Machining was done in locked shops, even inside Ford. Most people had no idea what was being built. At first glance, the finished engine looked like a normal big block Ford. The basic architecture was familiar. The block was recognizable. But then you noticed the valve covers. They were massive, wider than anything that had ever appeared under a stock car hood. They stretched out over the heads like something from a different era entirely. Underneath them was the secret. Instead of push rods, this engine ran a single overhead camshaft per head. The camshafts sat directly above the valves. No push rods to flex. No rocker arms to float. Direct actuation. The system was driven by a long, heavy-duty timing chain nearly 6 feet long. It snaked up from the crankshaft, around massive idler sprockets, and up to the cam gears on each head. The design was borrowed straight from Ford's Indy program. Those engines had already proven the concept at insane RPM. Now the same technology was being adapted for stock car racing. And that one decision changed everything. Because overhead cams don't just move valves, they move them faster, more precisely, with less weight. A pushrod engine has limitations. The valve train is heavy. Pushrods flex under load. Rocker arms have inertia. At high RPM, the whole system starts to float. Valves don't close when they should. Power falls off. And if you push too hard, things break. The Cammer didn't have those problems. The engine started with Ford's 427 FE racing block. This wasn't a production block with racing numbers stamped on it. This was a purpose-built foundation. Cross-bolted main bearing caps, thicker decks, reinforced webbing throughout. A 4.23-inch bore and a 3.78-inch stroke gave it 427 cubic inches of displacement, right at NASCAR's limit. Every cubic inch the rules allowed. But the breathing, that was on another planet. The SOHC heads used huge valves. Intake valves measured 2.25 inches. Exhaust valves were 1.90. To put that in perspective, most pushrod engines of the era used intake valves around 2.0 inches. The Camry had 12% more intake valve area, and it could open those valves faster and hold them open longer. The ports were designed with one goal in mind: maximum airflow at maximum RPM. Flow bench numbers were insane for the era. Engineers ran the heads and couldn't believe what they were seeing. The numbers looked like typos. They ran them again. Same results. With a single 4-barrel carburetor, the street version was rated at 616 horsepower at 7,000 RPM. That wasn't marketing fluff. That wasn't optimistic rounding. On dynos, some engines were already touching 650, and that was with a single carburetor. With dual quads, the numbers climbed higher. With fuel injection, even higher. In race trim, with high compression pistons pushing past 12.5 to 1, open headers, and aggressive cam profiles, engineers whispered about numbers closer to 700 horsepower in 1965. To put that in perspective, most NASCAR engines at the time struggled to make 425 reliably. A good Chevrolet 427 made maybe 450 on a perfect day. The Chrysler Hemi, the most feared engine in racing, was in the same neighborhood. The Camry was making 50% more power than the competition. This thing didn't just make power, it lived at RPM. The overhead cam design meant the valve train was light. No heavy push rods bouncing around, no rocker arm mass to accelerate and decelerate. While typical pushrod V8s started to fall apart past 6,200 RPM, the Camry pulled hard past 7,500. The power band just kept climbing. The engine didn't fall off, it kept pulling. Some test engines survived bursts near 8,000 RPM. Engineers would run them up just to see what would happen. The engine would scream, the dyno needle would climb, and nothing would break. That kind of speed didn't just win races, it changed the game entirely. It broke gearboxes. Transmissions that survived every pushrod engine ever made would shatter under Camry power. The torque multiplication at high RPM was more than they could handle. It twisted drive shafts. Steel tubes designed for 450 horsepower would wind up like taffy under 650. It exposed weak rear ends like they were made of glass. Ring and pinion sets would explode. Axle shafts would twist and snap. Parts that had worked for years suddenly weren't good enough. The Camry didn't just need a new engine bay, it needed a whole new car around it. But there was a problem, a big one. NASCAR's rulebook required engines to be production-based. The whole point of stock car racing was that the cars on the track had some connection to the cars in showrooms. You couldn't just build a pure racing engine and call it legal. There had to be a production version, a street version, something real customers could theoretically buy. And technically, Ford had never sold a single overhead cam V8 in a production car. Not one, ever. The entire Camry program existed only in racing shops and engineering labs. There was no Ford Galaxy you could walk into a dealer and buy with an overhead cam engine. There was no Fairlane, no Mustang, nothing. So Ford did what Ford always did in the 1960s. They built just enough to make it legal. Plans were drawn up to produce 500 engines. That was the magic number. Enough to satisfy NASCAR's homologation requirements. Enough to prove it was a production engine. They even assigned part numbers. Real Ford part numbers that would show up in catalogs. They created documentation. They established pricing. Dealers were told to get ready. Some engines were allegedly offered for sale. A handful may have actually been delivered to high-profile customers. The plan was simple: build 500 engines, call it production, race the thing, win everything. And that's when NASCAR panicked. Because Bill France Sr. wasn't stupid. He had been running NASCAR since the beginning. He had seen every trick, every loophole, every creative interpretation of the rules. He could read dyno sheets, and he understood consequences. If the camera raced, everyone else would be forced to follow. That meant overhead cams for everyone, exotic valve trains, specialized manufacturing, costs exploding overnight. A typical NASCAR team in 1965 could build a competitive pushrod engine for maybe $3,000. A camera cost 5 times that, maybe more. Small teams would be pushed out. Independent racers would disappear. The sport would become a war of checkbooks instead of a war of skill. And there was another concern, one that France understood better than anyone. NASCAR wasn't Formula One. It was supposed to be stock car racing. Cars that looked like what regular people drove. Engines that shared at least some DNA with what powered the family car. Overhead cams broke that connection. They made the cars into something else entirely. Pure racing machines with no relationship to the showroom. France saw where this was heading, and he didn't like it. So in February of 1965, before the season even really began, NASCAR dropped the hammer. Overhead camshaft engines were banned. Just like that. No appeals, no exceptions, no grace period, no grandfather clause for engines already built. The most advanced V8 ever built for NASCAR was outlawed without turning a competitive lap. Ford was furious. They had already spent millions, special blocks cast by hand, custom heads that took weeks to machine, timing chain systems that required skilled technicians to assemble properly. The engineering hours alone were staggering. The testing, the development, the tooling, all of it wasted. Ford executives screamed. They threatened to pull out of NASCAR entirely. They accused France of favoritism. They demanded explanations. They got nothing. Smokey Yunick, the legendary mechanic and car builder, later said, that engine scared them. They knew once it showed up, the game was over. And he wasn't wrong. In testing, camera-powered cars were already seconds faster per lap. Not tenths of seconds. Full seconds. Multiple seconds. On long tracks like Daytona and Talladega, the power advantage was devastating. Those tracks rewarded top speed. They rewarded engines that made peak power at high RPM. They rewarded exactly what the camera did best. Simulations showed that a camera car could lap the field at Daytona. Not just win, lap everyone. France understood what that meant. Nobody would watch a race where one car won by 5 miles. Nobody would sponsor a team that had no chance. Nobody would show up to a track where the outcome was predetermined. The sport would die. So the engine was banned from stock car racing after essentially one paper season. A season of planning, a season of testing, a season of anticipation, but 0 races, 0 laps in anger, 0 checkered flags. Ford had built the greatest NASCAR engine ever conceived, and it would never turn a competitive lap. But the story didn't end there. Because while NASCAR slammed the door, drag racers kicked it wide open. The NHRA and AHRA didn't have the same rules. They didn't care about production numbers. They didn't care about stock car heritage. They cared about one thing: going fast in a straight line. And for that, the camera was perfect. Almost overnight, the 427 SOHC became the most feared engine in drag racing competition. In top fuel dragsters, the camera was unstoppable. Those cars ran on nitromethane, pure explosive power, cylinder pressures that would destroy a normal engine in seconds. But the camera thrived. Its ability to rev high and survive insane cylinder pressures made it perfect for the application. The overhead cam valve train didn't flex under load. The valves opened and closed exactly when they were supposed to, at every RPM. under every condition. Drivers reported the same thing over and over. The engine never sounded stressed. It just kept pulling. Where other engines felt like they were fighting for their lives at 7,000 RPM, the Camry felt calm, controlled, like it had more to give. In funny cars, it was even worse for the competition. Funny cars were the wildest class in drag racing. Bodies that barely resembled production cars, engines that made terrifying power, runs that lasted seconds but felt like hours. A Camry-powered Mustang could run the quarter mile in the low 7-second range at over 190 mph. That was unheard of in the mid-1960s. Other teams couldn't touch those numbers. The Camry cars would launch, the tires would hook, and by half-track, the race was over. No drama, no excitement, just domination. And reliability? It was brutal. One team ran a full season with nothing but valve adjustments and oil changes. No bottom-end failures, no cracked heads, no timing chain problems, nothing. They would show up at the track, run qualifying, run eliminations, win, load up, drive to the next track. Other teams were rebuilding engines between rounds. Camry teams were eating lunch. The timing chain everyone feared would stretch? It didn't. Ford overbuilt it on purpose. The engineers knew the chain was the weak point in theory. A chain 6 feet long running at 7,000 RPM should stretch, should wear, should fail, so they made it indestructible. The chain was nearly an inch wide, heavy-duty rollers, hardened pins, materials that belonged in industrial equipment. Dual idlers kept tension perfect. Massive tensioners prevented slack. At 7,000 RPM, it stayed rock solid. At 8,000 RPM, still solid. Season after season, but the Camry had another secret: oil control. Unlike many high-revving engines of the era, the SOHC fed the crankshaft first. The oiling system was designed with priorities in mind. Main bearings got oil before anything else, then rod bearings, then camshafts and valve train. That one decision meant the engine could survive sustained high RPM without wiping bearings. The crank was always protected. The rods were always lubricated, even when the engine was screaming at redline. Other engines would starve their mains at high RPM. Oil would get trapped in the heads, pressure would drop, bearings would spin, engines would die. The Camry didn't have that problem. It was elegant, simple, and terrifying to the competition. Some engine builders tried to copy it. They studied Camry oiling systems, they measured passages, they reverse engineered the design. It took years for the lessons to spread, and by then, the Camry was already a legend. Ford also offered the Camry in limited numbers to select customers. These weren't regular production engines. They were hand-built, assembled by technicians who knew every bolt and bearing. Each engine came with documentation, serial numbers, build sheets. Buyers had to prove they were serious. Racing teams got priority. Wealthy collectors sometimes got lucky. The list price was astronomical, several times what a normal Ford engine cost. But for what you got, it was almost a bargain. By the late 1960s, the writing was on the wall. Emissions regulations were coming. The government was cracking down on pollution. Every year brought new requirements. Insurance companies were cracking down too. Muscle cars were getting expensive to insure. Young buyers couldn't afford the premiums. Racing budgets were tightening. Manufacturers were questioning the investment. The golden age was ending. Ford quietly ended production of the Camry. There was no announcement, no press release, just silence. Only around 500 Camry engines were ever built. Some say fewer. The exact number is debated. Records are incomplete. Many were scrapped. Cores melted down for the aluminum value. Parts separated and lost. Others were blown apart in drag racing. Engines that survived thousands of runs finally gave up. Blocks cracked, cranks broke, the parts scattered. A handful survived, tucked away in collections, hidden in garages, forgotten in warehouses. Today, a real Ford 427 SOHC can sell for over $250,000, sometimes more. Complete, documented engines have sold for $300,000 or higher. The parts alone are worth fortunes. Heads sell for 5 figures. Timing chain covers sell for thousands. Even small brackets and fittings bring premium prices. Collectors hunt for them obsessively. Every swap meet has someone looking for camera parts. Every estate sale gets scrutinized. The engine that NASCAR killed became one of the most valuable in history. And here's the real irony. NASCAR eventually adopted overhead cam engines decades later. The technology they banned in 1965 became mandatory by the 2000s. Every modern cup car runs an overhead cam V8, the same basic concept Ford pioneered. Camshafts over the valves, direct actuation, high RPM capability, the very technology they feared is now required. But by then, the moment had passed. Ford never got their glory. The Camry never got its victory. The engineers who built it never saw their work validated on the track they designed it for. The Camry was a glimpse into a future that arrived too early, too powerful, too disruptive, too threatening to the establishment. It wasn't banned because it broke the rules. It was banned because it broke the sport. Bill France made a business decision: protect the existing order, keep the teams competitive, keep the fans engaged, keep the money flowing. And from his perspective, he was right. NASCAR survived, NASCAR thrived, NASCAR became a billion-dollar industry, but the Camry paid the price. In the end, that engine didn't just represent horsepower, it represented a choice between innovation and tradition, between winning and survival, between the future and the present. And NASCAR chose survival. Maybe they had to. Maybe there was no other way. Maybe letting the Camry race would have destroyed the sport faster than banning it. But we'll never know, because they never let it try. 1 season on paper, 0 races, a lifetime of legend. Somewhere in a private collection, an original Camry sits on an engine stand, polished, preserved, silent. It never turned a lap at Daytona. It never crossed the finish line at Charlotte. It never heard the roar of a stock car crowd. But everyone who sees it knows what it could have done. And that's why the legend lives on. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of the most dangerous engines ever built, let me know in the comments what story you want next. Another banned machine, another forgotten rivalry, or another moment when racing history almost took a very different turn. And make sure to subscribe, because there are still a lot of secrets hiding under old valve covers.